Hey yo! I didn't get to do one in the actual episode, so we're gonna get hey yo in the beginning. Welcome to episode numero cuatro, number 4. Just firstly to address why there was no episode last week. Why is this in my face? Nice. There was no episode last week because I'm changing it to bi-weekly. First of all, people have complained about the length of episodes. I'm trying to now do it bi-weekly so that people can spread out the time that they're watching it so they can enjoy the whole thing in a larger amount of time. Second of all, just to have an ease of uploads. A lot of my uploads have been gone or removed or not recorded well. So I need that kind of time. And I hope you guys can understand and hope everybody enjoys and watches the episodes. So this week's episode is my friend Sharif Al Abbas. He is a political science and economic major at Seton Hall University. And Brother Zeyad's back again. Yeah, I know you guys didn't want him. It's okay. He's back. They hated him enough. He's right to the side. So yeah, today we're going to discuss everything current events. So from Corona to the elections in general and Trump, and we go into a really good, and I highly recommend everybody watch this episode. We go into like very more controversial, but as well as like very deep topics into media and news, etc., etc. I hope you guys all enjoy this episode. I hope you guys continue to support. I appreciate everybody, and let's get into the episode. I am finally starting this after 10...
It's been 10,000 years.
It's been like 20 minutes now?
20 minutes is putting it lightly. I think 20 minutes was...
20 minutes was like an hour ago.
I think I've genuinely reached 2 hours of setting this up. We have to go through like mic difficulties, my brain difficulties, everything difficulties, my phone dying,
emotional distress,
headaches.
There may have been some objects thrown.
Lack of Advil.
Yeah, especially after he bumped his head. He really needed that Advil.
I actually really need it right now. I bumped my head while praying. That was nice.
At least there's no closet to run.
Nice brothers. Yeah, nice.
We'll talk about that later.
God.
Let's start.
Alright, so today, special episode. So you guys are on a special episode, but Zeyad, Sharif, special episode. So we're gonna use your expertise now to talk about everything current events. From Corona, to...
Which does not have anything to do with the beer brand. Don't let the 33% of Americans who actually think that fool you.
Do they actually?
Yes, it's close to a third. And that's the stock of Corona, the beer, went down because of that. So that would have been a good time to buy in if it wasn't haram.
I love that 30 out of 1 out of 3 of your friends
30 something percent, yeah.
Of your friends, 1 out of 3 thinks that Corona has to do with beer. Nice, I like this. Or at least the virus. Yeah, we're gonna go from Corona to I don't even know what. So let's get started. Corona. So now, Brother Zeyad, you know this. We're out to when?
We're out till April 13th.
And I'm out till April 13th as well.
And so, question goes, first of all, right? Do you think how long do you think it's gonna last?
It could be several months. I mean, the thing is, the testing. South Korea has it more or less contained at this point, and in China, it's winding down. The president of China actually visited Wuhan, which he wouldn't do if he didn't think it was winding down.
I heard that was fake.
But regardless, the situation is winding down in China, and it is winding down in South Korea. The issue in America, though, is that the federal response has been so ridiculously slow. I mean, everything from the pandemic team not being available because Trump fired them in 2018, to cuts in the CDC budget, to him refusing the tests from the World Health Organization, to downplaying it, saying it was like the flu. The response has not been great.
One of the things you can look at is you do pick the countries, China, South Korea, but there's one key difference. The key difference is that those countries implemented measures right away. Mm-hmm. Right. If you look at when China locked on the whole Hubei province with Wuhan's in, you're going to see that their infection rate was 3 times less than what the U.S. is right now. So we've even passed that point.
Wow.
I mean, you're asking yourself, like, for example, what's the death rate for this thing, right? So South Korea tested 140,000 people, more than anyone else, and they said something like 0.6%.
Okay. Even though it says 6 though.
0.6%, right? So like a fraction of a percent, not even one. Then you have places like Italy that has 5%. Iran has like 4 or 5%.
8% of Iran's parliament is infected.
Yeah. And then you're looking at other places like, why is it so? The World Health Organization said it's 3.4%. So what's the discrepancy? The discrepancy comes in for how soon they took action. The countries like Italy that, they took action late, you're going to see like a higher death percentage because they let it go on they let it spread too much. China locked it down very, very quickly. And then that's why you're seeing that they're recovering. Like they're pretty much on their way to recovery, right? I think there's less than 10 reported cases per day or something like that.
Yeah. South Korea is testing 15,000 people a day. I mean, it's astonishing.
They're menacing.
But then Sharif was going on blaming, Trump has a lot to blame.
Well, I mean,
but like, how much is it just Trump, and how much is it like? The government in total.
I said the federal government's like response to it. I use the word federal government response has been pretty poor just in general. Obviously, Trump bears blame for trying to downplay and then proceeding to declare an emergency, maybe even a few days later. So certainly he bears a lot of the blame for it. But just in general, the very slow response, slow rates of testing, saying that coronavirus treatment's going to be free and then saying, oh, no, it wasn't a coronavirus treatment, just testing, the things like that, really, really slowing the response down, making it so that people are afraid to get tested so they can't afford it, or just in general, the fact that South Korea is testing 15,000 people a day, despite having a fraction of our population, and we're not even testing anywhere close to that. I mean, let's say that we experience the same number of cases regardless. But if we can spread them out over a long enough timeline, then hospitals will be better able to deal with them. Italy's being overwhelmed right now because they're dealing with so many different cases at once. I'm sure that there's a certain level of certain number of cases that are going to happen no matter what. But if you spread them out longer, then we'll be better able to weather through the crisis.
So
but then, so do you think the federal government? Because look, I don't think the response in total was. You muted yourselves. You sure? All right. Do you, so like even here, right? Nobody thought Corona was a big deal until it got here. It's the truth. People knew it was a big deal, but it wasn't like as big a deal.
Yeah, out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah. You would have thought, okay, yeah, it's a big deal, but it's a problem with China. And then when it got here, it's slow. Like I think it slowly built up in severity in terms of like how it was perceived at least. So then, do you think in the early stages there was a reason to say that everybody's overreacting? Do you see my point? Like, okay,
given how quickly it spread, and the drastic measures China took, I think you could have predicted that this is probably going to be a lot worse than you're thinking, right? You're not overly dramatic. I think one of the responses that they could have done, looking back on it, you could also say that everything is in retrospective, right? Have people mass vaccinations for the flu. I know the reason why, because now when you have new cases, you can immediately kind of rule out the flu if you had mass vaccinations, for example. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? I think that would have been a good response. Right now, I think that by not accepting the World Health Organization's testing kits, what's happening now? They pick their own testing kit and then they realize, hey, it actually doesn't work. It's little incompetencies like that that's just prolonging it. And as Sharif was mentioning, like that spreading out over a long period of time. I think that's the main idea right now. I think some social scientists and saying scientists are saying the best way to do that is social distancing, right? These lockdown measures.
But it's but that's just prevention.
No, that's mitigation. It has we can't prevent it. It's in. You just have to mitigate the effects now. How do you do that? Trying to prevent it from spreading.
Yeah, right. Reducing public demonstrations, just general. This is one of the few pandemics that you can correct for with individual changes in actions and whatnot, and that's something that we should really take advantage of. Be it simple things like washing your hands for 20 minutes and not touching your face, versus legally mandated things like not wanting people to engage in public demonstrations. Canceling sporting events or canceling the crowds force at sporting events if you have to.
#RIP Juma.
Yeah.
RIP Salat al Juma, subhanAllah.
Yeah, if anyone can get us VIP tickets to the private Jummah, please let us. Please.
There's context, and if Brother Zeyad tells a person to watch this, he's gonna see the context.
There's private Jummahs being held right now, guys.
Private Jummah, which specific people only allowed.
We know you're watching this. We demand tickets right now.
We want to know, please.
Alhamdulillah.
I actually prayed Jummah, so you guys didn't pray, right?
Well, I prayed, there were a few people in my
You prayed, no,
university.
sorry, you guys did pray Jummah. Sorry. So, but like the masjid was empty, my God.
Alhamdulillah.
Like it was so weird.
I saw this video too, like, you know, when there's a time of plague or something, or like even distress, or they say it's really, really hard, like the muaddin can say, pray in your houses.
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah,
Yeah, it's amazing.
saw the video.
Yeah.
It's like, bro, Sharif, the shit. By the time I got to the masjid. Salah starts at 1:15, right? Usually, and I got to the masjid at 12:45. By 1:15, by 1, there was 3 lines. By 15 minutes before Salah.
Versus the usual where you have people standing outside trying to squeeze in.
And I was like, huh? And it shows, like, every time I talk to you, and then every time I talk to him, right? It's like this conflict. Like, every time I talk to him, I feel like worse. Right? I was like, this is when I go into this whole thing where I came into school. I was like, I want school to shut down now. I was like, I want it down now. I want
about the corona,
Yeah. But when I talk to you, it's like, okay, no, Ahmed, calm down. Like it's not as bad.
We're the angel and devil on your shoulders.
Yes, I need an angel. Sharif, thank you for
I
being.
mean, I think it still could go either way though. If you're just going back to the corona stuff, where we mentioned like Italy has like 5%, right? And Sharif was mentioning that just trying to flatten out to spread it out so the hospitals aren't overwhelmed. Overwhelmed, right? I think like the US, if you have 100,000 cases, I was reading something. If you have 100,000 cases, they're going to have masks for the next 2 weeks for all health employees. They're literally going to run out in 2 weeks.
Wow.
If you have 100,000 cases, and by the rate it's going, if we're looking at we're 1/3 where China shut down, we're 3 times past where China shut down. We're gonna have more than 100,000 cases. Yeah. So you're gonna just overwhelm. We don't even have enough masks. Forget like the ventilators and the respirator, everything that goes with that. The reason why Italy is having and I was reading this amazing article that Italian doctors just yesterday they published guidance for other doctors, and they were talking. The trolley dilemma.
Yeah, the trolley.
Right.
Yeah.
5 people are on a track. The train goes 2 directions. 5 people here. A loved one this way. Which way do you go? Which do you direct the train? Right. And that's like always a philosophical conversation you always have when you're like in a beginning philosophy course or something, or sociology course.
Yes.
Right. These doctors came out and said that we don't have enough equipment to deal with everything, so prioritize the ones who you can save. Basically, and
I read that yesterday. I was about to ask
they
you about
give
that.
guidance about like older people with underlying medical conditions like diabetes, high blood pressure. Don't prioritize them.
It's a horrifiing situation.
Just leaving them out to
mandating
die.
eugenics
And that's what's happening in
effectively.
Italy,
in a first world country, the European country, Italy. You're not expecting that, and that's because they decided to do these social distancing lockdown measures too late. I think the U.S. is like, I think they're right there too with that number where they haven't reacted yet. So I believe one of the machines that was vitally needed, the U.S. had 250 of them.
He's my devil now.
All right, 250 of them, just a few years ago. And if you're looking at about 5% of the population would need those. If 100,000 people get affected, we're
not even close.
You're not gonna share ventilators, like breathe for like 2 minutes, let me go share with the other guy for the next.
You can suffocate for 90 seconds. Here, let this other person.
Shape on the bright side, we're good.
So I think that's gonna drive up the death rate.
We would get masks and Brothers Zeyad wouldn't, so we're good. You're older. I feel bad.
Yeah, I'm a lot older than you.
So like, but shitty for chilling, man. But isn't what's the death rate for our age? 0.2.
It's very small for our age. That's not to say we should get complacent. But
No, but I saw something. I mentioned this shit. It's pretty funny. It's like all these kids were like, "Oh, we're good, bro. We're good. We're teenagers. You've been vaping all week. You've been vaping all week."
China, like 60-something% of the older men in China smoke, and the death rate among these older men who were smoking was 10%.
Wow.
So it was something just absolutely ridiculous numbers. So weak lungs, any sort of autoimmune disease could increase your vulnerability to the point that an old person has.
Yeah.
But smoking too, weaken your lungs. My roommate has cystic fibrosis.
Oh, that's really that's
Yeah.
gonna be
Yeah.
very, very
It's very
because
serious.
that's like a
Yeah, so
long
it's-
term mucus. Yeah.
But it's like it's hard to gauge in the beginning stages. But like I think it's also I'm mind blanking. I love when I mind blank on podcasts. Nice guys. Sharif, don't
I'm sorry, I might give you guys corona.
Sharif, man.
Sharif, you don't do that here.
Yeah, I think these mics are from China. Like,
We're about to practice some social distancing right
Yeah.
now.
So, Sharif, let me count. 1, 2. How many is 6 feet? Bro, at the machine, I want to sit 6 feet away from everybody. I want it so bad.
Yeah, right now they're enforcing in Italy. They're enforcing the 3 to 6 feet rule. You can't walk in public with anyone 3 to
And
6
isn't it now? It's Sharif, you told me this. It's on surfaces for 3 days or what?
Yeah, 9, I think.
well, repeat that.
It's the corona can stay on surface for 3 days and then
Yes.
in the air for 3 hours.
Something like that.
Yes,
So it's like, and you said some people were getting sick without.
without any clear person-to-person transfer. So that would indicate that they were on some sort of chair that someone else had sat on, and that's how they got it.
That's
It's very scary.
That's like, oh my god, my dad is hoarding, my guy. I don't know, but is it semi hoarding?
I'm just hoarding water. Whatever.
I need my mat.
I don't trust the water over here.
My dad just gets hookups, but bro, there's nothing in Costco. Like my dad went yesterday. No water at Costco. Not a bottle.
Walmart was the same thing.
It's crazy. But then it's like a lot of people will be like, well, how much of that is too much? Is overreacting as well.
A lot of it is overreacting. I mean, it's like the Y2K situation where everyone just thought the world was going to end or something, and then they just bought out the whole store. But I think this one, even though it's overreacting, I think just the whole fighting and stuff that someone's fighting over toilet paper the other day. It reminded me of you have all these Americans and just general people, anti-immigrants. They're talking about immigrants. Look at these immigrants and look how they behave and stuff. And these people are escaping violence in their country, whatever it is, right? And it's like you guys just heard there's a virus, and all of a sudden you're fighting over toilet paper. You know what I'm saying? It's night and day. You can really put things in perspective.
Chickens can't come home to roost, as Malcolm X says. When confronted with a similar situation that these immigrants face every single day, they go wild just as much as they perceive the immigrants to go wild. And the situation they're facing aren't nearly as bad. Not to undermine how bad the coronavirus situation is, but when you're running away from a dictator who uses chemical weapons on his own people, I think that's safe to say that's a tier above what we might be facing now.
There was a famous political scientist. I think he said, "You're only 4 meals away from anarchy."
Explain.
When people go hungry,
Yeah.
riots happen. That's when
Yeah, in Sudan, the Bashir wasn't. He was a dictator for decades, but it wasn't until bread prices skyrocketed and gas prices skyrocketed that people really began to protest, and he was overthrown within the year. If people, you can throw everything at people.
My guys in Sudan.
The same thing. The whole Middle East uprising. It was you could trace it. There was a teacher in high school, and he was talking about you can trace every revolution through the price of bread.
Of course.
Once bread price goes up,
Yeah.
you see revolutions happening. Food
Because
prices
bread
go
is
up.
the food of the poor, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Food prices go up. You'll start seeing revolutions. That's just and this puts things in perspective, right? How fragile society is, right? That artifice of society.
Yeah.
Um,
Take anything away from people, but if you take their food, they revolt. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, but like here, it's like, well, in this situation, we have food, we have everything, but like, I wish people would revolt because, like, look, New Jersey's on top of things to an extent, like, and then New Jersey,
I think the response in New Jersey.
Yeah, one of the better responses
one
for
of the
sure.
But then Trump decides today to have a state of emergency, and how much is it like FEMA? So I'm not too familiar with FEMA situation. How much can FEMA do now that it has that much money?
I mean, FEMA is an entire agency that their goal is to respond to these emergency situations. So they'll have resources, they'll have people power.
Where do you think most of the money's gonna go?
In terms of, you'll have to look at basic hospital stuff, right? Just people getting into the hospital, getting people tested. I think that's one of the big things, right? Because if you don't test people if you don't know who's contacting whom, and you don't lock those people down. I think that's the bigger.
But isn't that so for me? So like from devil's advocate perspective, that's like a never-ending struggle. You're gonna keep putting money into constantly trying to find people when you could put money into fixing. Like I can see both.
Well, if you can find them quickly enough and like lock them down, I think it'll be effective. China had 5-person teams. They had 1,800 5-person teams. 1,800 5-person teams, and anybody who got infected, they looked at who those people met within the last 7 days or so, and then who those people met. They were very, very thorough about it. I mean, it's only a country like a very authoritarian country can get away with that.
To say the least,
let's
putting
get
it lightly.
5 people, 1,800 5 people teams to just like look into everything about your life.
Yeah.
But it basically controlled the situation. It controlled it to the point that they're not even having any more new cases. That's crazy. I don't think we'll be able to do that.
No.
No. But if we can do something like it, try to get it contained. I think right now, getting it contained and then getting it mitigated, right? You just have to try to prevent more spreading.
You don't think there'll be some type of cure, right? There won't be some type of medicine for it, or not in time spent possible?
Vaccines usually take more than a year.
Yeah, so. I think I think it's better to try and keep people social distancing and whatnot, slow the spread of the virus, because by the time the vaccine or whatever cure that we find is developed, if we sit around on our hands waiting for that to happen, the virus will have already spread to a point where we're overwhelmed. So we need to kind of ride the tide out first and mitigate the damage as much as possible while we develop a cure, so that we don't have to constantly deal with this.
It's crazy how the richest country in the world is having this issue. I never thought it was going to get here, by the way.
All the richest countries in the world.
Yeah.
It's so crazy. And Sr. Trump is going to cost us. I think today's, by the state of emergency, is 100% the same as presidency. I think it's at risk.
This could very well end up being Trump's Hurricane Katrina, with how poorly he's responded to this, because I'm sure everyone who's watching this has been aware of the Dow tipping off the edge of the world, how much the stock market's been flowing, and I'm not going to call the economy that we've been having over the past few months good, because I don't agree with the definition of good economy that most people use, but the economy is good in the sense that the stock market has been consistent and the GDP has been consistently growing. When Trump loses that, he has very little that he can brag about in November. And when you pair that to how poorly he's responded so far to this whole ordeal, his seat could very well end up being lost in November, regardless of how weak the candidate for the Democrats ends up being.
Yeah.
And the dude, going on the stock thing, wasn't oil last week $30?
Yeah, it's been declining.
It was at $30, which is the price of the barrel itself.
Yeah, Saudi Arabia cut their price to try and compete with Russia. They're in a price war right now.
Yeah, which is also going to be another issue.
And that happened the same day as the coronavirus really spiked.
And the stock market crashing when they had to turn it off for 15 minutes.
Yeah, all happened. I think they even had a halt date. The halt to trading for
50 minutes. Yeah,
something like this.
Shut it down. And so we mentioned Trump, and Sharif has a lot to rant about, but Zeyad as well.
Well, I'm not as angry as I was a couple weeks ago. It's been released.
I want you angry. Let's get you angry, okay? Let's get Sharif angry.
So
Sharif, Sanders is losing, my guy.
I don't think I've had my hope raised so high for a few months and then snatched so quickly, because I didn't expect Sanders to even get to the first place position in the first place. But
with the first three, right?
Yeah, I thought he was just going to get stuck at second or third place for the entire election, and he would keep his devoted voter base, but he'd never expand past that. Once around January, when he passed Biden and got to the first place mark, I was ecstatic.
So happy.
I was over the moon, because Sanders to me is very much a once in a generation figure. He's been able to expand the American overtone window so much to a point where now you have people, prominent politicians like Elizabeth Warren, who are talking about cutting military spending, who are talking about single-payer healthcare as if it's a normal issue. And not single-payer healthcare, it's not just Elizabeth Warren, someone progressive like her. You also have people like Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, who are trying to co-opt the issue. Obviously, with their own version. Medicare for all who want it is Buttigieg's version of the plan. Very bourgeois kind of phrasing there. But setting that aside, the fact that he's even been able to inject these issues into the mainstream, try to really shift the Democratic Party to a point where they're not serving corporate interest as much as they were in the past. It's really amazing to me. And the fact that he could generate such a major following, despite all the barriers that have been placed in front of him, it made me extremely, extremely excited to see him get to that first place. And, with his performances in Iowa, New Hampshire, and then Nevada, completely demolishing in Nevada, getting like 45%, I was like, yeah, he's got this. And then about two days before Super Tuesday.
Naive.
2 days.
How naive.
The establishment strikes. It's like Star Wars.
Bro,
The Empire Strikes Back.
This is how freedom dies, with roaring applause.
I was talking to a friend, I can't mention him, he knows who he is. When they all drop out at the same time, there's not a setup.
Of course,
yes.
There's not a setup.
I mean, I think at that point, Klobuchar and Buttigieg realized, okay, we have zero appeal with the people of color. We're not going to win the nomination. So let's make sure that Sanders loses. So Sunday, Buttigieg drops out. He endorses Biden. Monday, Klobuchar drops out. She endorses Biden. And there's this huge convention where now you have Beto O'Rourke endorsing Biden. And all these other politicians, establishment. And then Tuesday, Biden not only wins, but he wins states that no one even thought he was going to win, like Maryland and Massachusetts. Michigan, he wins 2 weeks. It was this week. Yeah. But, he winning 10 states to Sanders is 4, And that was even with, like, Bloomberg splitting the vote between him and then, you also had Warren splitting the vote between Sanders, but you had Bloomberg splitting the vote between Biden. So it's still, the fact that he had that and he was still able to win so decisively was really frustrating.
We all know Bloomberg was a sent to screw everybody over anyway.
Bloomberg, I actually wanted to talk about him for a bit because Bloomberg is really the epitome of how far you can stretch this Democratic label and people can still insist not to play purity politics. This phrase, purity politics.
Define it.
Well, see, one of the central questions of any movement that seeks to advance any sort of interest, typically left-wing movements, from the anti-colonial movements to abolitionist movements to civil rights movements, the central question has been, when do we compromise and when do we keep pushing forward regardless of the barriers in front of us? That's been the central question. But when you have this phrase, purity politics, it takes that entire conversation and puts it in the bin. It essentially says, okay, you're just trying to have purity politics. You need to accept people who aren't perfect ideologically. And Bloomberg, this guy who's stop and frisk, overtly racist, everything, because this is supposed to be the party that can resist corporations, the party that stands for the rights of minorities. The fact that you have this guy who's being defended on CNN by Dunham saying, hey, let's just give this guy a chance. The fact that that's happened really has just kind of taken the veil off this whole
anybody can be
mask.
anything they want to be.
Yeah,
and you can't question it.
Yeah, just as long as you're a Democrat, you can be accepted.
That side though, Sharif.
It's the movement of society right now.
I mean, when asked why, it's like, oh well, he's 0.3% better than Trump. Okay, he is, but what kind of standard is that?
He's better than the next guy. That's it. Let's go.
And Biden's in the same. But Biden's in the same boat.
I don't think Biden's as bad as Bloomberg, but yeah, he's pretty bad.
He's in the same boat. He's
I'd say Bloomberg's worse than Biden. I would say so. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's the same concept. It's like he's not from the logical, straightforward people who have a brain perspective. I'm sorry if I'm being offensive. I don't care. Postmodernism offensive. I don't care. Biden is that character who's like, well, he's better than Trump. Same concept. Even though he is racist. What was it? The jungle comment?
Yeah, I mean, he was he had some issue back in the 1970s when they were trying to do integration, the bus integration.
Correct.
And he was using a lot of code word, but it was a lot of racist code word, like it's, my kids are going to be in a racial jungle, and other things like that. Like you're surprised then that this guy is now winning the African American vote decisively.
Yeah,
and it's especially stark when you compare it to Bernie Sanders in the same time period, who's getting arrested for protesting.
Yeah. Like who am I going to believe? Someone who says that they're for black rights, or someone who's arrested in the 1960s protesting for civil rights?
It's amazing. It's one of those things that in American politics, I think Malcolm X had it best when he was talking about the ballot to the bullet.
One of the best speeches in American history.
My favorite speech in American history. and he was describing that the Democrats at that point in time had controlled 2/3 of the House, they controlled the presidency, they controlled 2/3 of the Senate, and there was still no civil rights. And he's like, they've just left you behind. He's like, they're just, you're being continually duped because you're not making your vote. You're not making them earn your vote. And I think that's what's happening right now. I think you just have, you know what? We've got this population. We've got this population. There's no reason to appeal to them. There's no reason. Who are you going to vote for? Your only other option is Trump. So
but
you don't need to
is
do
the
anything
issue in the system then, or is the issue in the system, or is the issue in the people?
The first issue, the two-party system allows for that, right?
Yes.
Because
Yeah,
you have
absolutely.
what? You have either you vote for whoever we selected for you, despite your intense dislike for them, Hillary Clinton, right?
Yeah.
Or you get that guy, and you're always stuck between that lesser evil. You're always stuck between that lesser evil duality, right?
Yeah.
You're never. I'm going to vote for the candidate of who I side with ideologically, and they'll accuse you of being a purist, as Sharif was mentioning. They say, "Oh, you just want you're being too ideological. We have to go for someone who's electable, right?"
Yes.
And we're talking
And
about
we're gonna
electability.
talk about
Yeah.
electability. I think the tautology of electability is a big reason as to why Biden is winning. Because Biden's entire campaign has been run on the fact that, or not the fact, the perception that he can beat Trump, that he's the man who can beat Trump. No one else can do it. And, given the Democratic voter base's complete disdain for Trump, it makes sense that they'd want someone who can get him out of office. That being said, what is electability? What constitutes electability?
I don't know. Please.
I don't know, because it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It's dementia, my guy.
Yeah.
You have to have dementia to do it.
Most of these issues that Sanders campaigns on within the Democratic electorate are very, very popular. Even in the most conservative
70%
state,
for
Mississippi, 2/3 of people supported single-payer health care. So when you have these issues that are very, very popular but still not getting support, that indicates that these voters have tricked themselves into thinking that Sanders is just impossible to get elected, despite the fact that if they all actually voted for Sanders, he would get elected.
It's also because the media keeps bombarding you with this idea, right?
Yeah.
Oh, he's not electable. He's not electable. You got to pick the electable candidate, right?
Yeah.
Democrat. Right before the Super Tuesday, there was an article, I believe, in the New York Times, was saying Democrats don't ruin this. Don't ruin this like by picking Bernie. They're telling you. So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, as Ahmed was mentioning. You just keep mentioning it,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden, it just becomes the narrative.
Yeah.
He's unelectable.
It also shuts down any conversation we can actually have about values and ideas, because now all of a sudden it isn't a war of ideas anymore. It's just say, what can we do to win? Now you're dismissing an entire field of ideas because they're being viewed as pipe dreams, despite the fact that Sanders has successfully injected these ideas into the mainstream. They're very much more popular and much more prominent within the American political discourse than they were even 10 years ago.
4 years ago,
Obamacare was radical in 2010. Now it's being viewed as just like a half measure. Now any form of universal health care pulls at about 70%.
Yeah.
Republicans have very large amounts of support for universal health care. Maybe not Sanders' plan, but the fact that they're even in support of a guarantee for health care is astonishing and wouldn't have been the case a few years ago.
Then see, this is where my issue, same concept of this value thing. Like, I always put it like this: is universal health care a good thing? Okay, yes. So then that should be our goal, and then the means to it, then we can discuss. But we should all have the same goal. But it seems like, as you guys said, like the goal now is just getting there. Because getting to the presidency, and then once we get to the presidency, there is no goal. It's just whatever.
Well, ideally, if you had like people vote on the best platform, for example, the best ideas, I think you'll get something like that. But you don't have that, right? You don't have people are voting on external factors. Whether this guy's electable or this guy's back in 2000 Gore versus Bush, for example, Bush would he would speak with a certain drawl. He would start talking like very down to earth. He would wear jeans. He'd wear a hat, and he would say, "I'm the guy you can drink a beer with." Al Gore, he's that smarmy elite.
Yeah.
Right?
He's very stereotypical. He's what Republicans refer to when they say coastal liberal.
Coastal Eastern liberal, right? And he's not going to be the guy you hang out with. Even the way Bush spoke, like you look at his videos from like 1996 when he's debating, rapid fire, super sharp. You look at 2000, he's like completely almost like to like a buffoon level. Like he's like, I'm the down to earth guy. And once you have that kind of situation driving politics, where it's not ideas, ideas don't drive politics. No one votes for people vote for personalities, right?
Yeah.
And if it's like a computer system, like if you just take the people out of it and say pick the best platform, you'll see clearly like a Bernie Sanders platform winning. Unfortunately, it's not like that.
And then what do you think it's going to take to get there? Because it seems like time and time again, the one time, and Shiri said this, the one time we have this good president possibility, which in Sanders, the one time they screw it up. So what could possibly, and you're learning this in school, so you're that new next phase of where this things can go. Where do you think that change comes in, or how?
I think the change is going to need to be empowered by the youth, by my generation. And when I say my generation, I mean my generation right now, because the voter turnout for people who are ages 18 to I believe 27 is still 15%. That's with Sanders and his very exciting platform, his platform that speaks directly to the concerns of young people regarding student debt, rising tuition costs, rising housing costs, stagnant wages, healthcare costs that are rising through the roof far beyond wages. And if we don't get out to vote, because Sanders polled at around 87% with people in the ages 18 to 27 range. So if we could increase turnout within my generation, then I think that could really, really, really be the major force that drives people like Sanders. Sanders is 78 years old. He's not going to be around for much longer, unfortunately. But, the politicians that come after him, the figures that come after him, it's going to need to be the youth that empowers that change. And, all I can say is if you're watching this and you're not registered to vote. I've hosted a few voter drives. You'd be shocked at how many rich white kids don't have any sort of voter registration at all. So please, this change isn't going to happen by itself. And if you're feeling that your interests aren't being represented, look at Sanders' platform. I promise you, when you're paying tens of thousands of dollars for college tuition costs, you're going to be thankful that someone like Sanders is in office.
Yeah. The other thing is, if you really want to get this change, I think the biggest thing about Bernie is, I think his most major success is that he awoke certain issues. And he awoke certain segments in the population
100%.
that is not just every 4 years. I think anyone knows the Bernie movement. 2 years ago you're hearing about, 3 years ago. Since 2016, 17, 18, they're still active.
Yes.
Right? They've had Bernie, meetups and everything else. My brother's part of this group. They meet periodically to discuss issues and strategically coordinate different things. So I think his biggest success is this. And I think if you want to have a change eventually, you'll have to try to have these groups try to get local candidates and then representatives to the House and even the Senate. I think if you try to empower these people, I think you can have some change.
But then here's where my counter argument to you is going to come in, right? Counter argument to you, but it's also like there's in a different point of view, right? I don't know how and it's from I haven't voted yet, but it's from my limited perspective, right? The voting now the electorate is not going to change their mind on who they've like. I think it's once they've had an idea set in stone, whoever votes doesn't make a difference. They're voting for their party or whatever they've put their mind to. So I think, and this is connecting to Brother Zeyad, right? I think it's from the best way the youth can participate is not in necessarily voting, but not necessarily voting, but in constantly bringing the conversation to the table. I think it's that more, because that's gonna have the long-lasting change. Because of course the politicians are gonna talk about what's hip, right, or what the people want to talk about. So if more of us are talking about things, not necessarily voting,
I actually I screwed up by only mentioning voting, because oftentimes you'll see media outlets do this all the time. They'll never encourage their readers to go out and protest. It'll never happen. They'll always say vote. the only way you can participate in the political process in the eyes of major media
Once every
outlets,
4 years.
once every 4 years, sign a name by a ballot and leave. That's it. But obviously, we need to have, it was in the 2018 blue wave where we saw people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib get elected. People who would be unthinkable
10 years ago.
People who identify as democratic socialists, and I don't think they fit that label personally, but the fact that they can self-identify like that in America and still get elected and be champions of these issues like Medicare for All is astonishing. And that's driven by what Brother Zeyad said, these people who 2-3 years ago weren't active and now they're active in their local and state politics and getting these politicians and figures recognized.
So yeah, I mean, one of the things is that hopefully the Bernie, however this election plays out, his supporters continue that, right? They're not so disenchanted with the system. In fact, even being disenchanted with the system might actually push them even. Hopefully, it might even push them even wrap up that effort. Yeah.
I mean, I'm angry pretty much all the time following politics. And all it does is make me more and more interested to learn about it because it's an abusive relationship of sorts. But I enjoy it.
Abusive relationship.
Yes.
And I have hope things go well. I don't know. Like I don't get what's wrong with Bernie. What is it? Like I understand. Look, I understand this moderate claim, and I can get it to an extent. Can't a moderate can apply to for those swaying Republican voters to get them more on the Democratic side?
I mean, what's a moderate candidate, by the way?
Yeah. What issues do you have to hold to? What positions do you have to hold to be moderate? Because Michael Dukakis, center left candidate, but he was opposed to the death penalty, and that was enough to make him not appear like a moderate. And it's become this lore almost that, this guy lost the election because he was a radical, but his platform was center left. He was not a radical by any stretch. He just opposed the death penalty, and that's what people campaigned against him on.
And this whole idea of moderate, I think that the political spectrum has shifted so far. We were discussing it earlier actually. Richard Nixon, who in the 1960s and 70s was considered extremely right-wing, right? He supported a poverty program. He supported some sort of not a universal healthcare program, but a expanded healthcare program. Yes. He supported all these measures that you would say, were Democrats to adopt this today, they would be considered too far left.
Yeah, and this isn't a defense of Nixon, by the way.
This is not to say Nixon was a great character. It's just saying that his positions, which would by the time were considered too far to the right, today would be considered something you would be too far to the left. So this whole idea of moderate, unfortunately, moderate means the status quo, and the status quo tends to favor more corporate.
But although we discussed earlier that it's not about beating Trump, right? But isn't that from a political perspective? Isn't that more towards the status quo? What could be Trump? Well, do you think it's the truth? Do you think, from my perspective, although I prefer Bernie in terms of values and ethics, Biden is that more status quo character. That might get more votes.
It didn't work for Hillary.
It didn't work for John Kerry. It didn't work for Al Gore. It only worked for Bill Clinton because there was a third-party spoiler running in that election in 1992.
This whole idea, the Democrats keep sending up centrists, and they keep getting demolished. Keep getting demolished. So what are they going to do this year?
Obama won in 2008, but he campaigned himself as a progressive. He didn't govern as a progressive, but he presented himself.
But that situation was a little different because he was the foil to Hillary, and then he was coming off of Bush.
Yeah, 8 years of Bush.
8 years of Bush. I think any Democrat who wasn't Hillary Clinton would probably been elected.
I got this. I'll be that guy.
I also think it's important to point out the the racialized elements to this electability argument too, because the main argument Clinton had in 2008 was the fact that she was electable over Obama. And this had a very, very strong racial component, an explicit racial component. That was what the strong Hillary supporters would hammer against, the fact that Obama's not going to win. He won in a landslide, and that was with 25% of Hillary supporters switching to John McCain, and Obama still won in a landslide. That's something I think that's really important to consider. And by kind of conceding this electability argument, which the left for some reason does so frequently, you kind of give the powers that be all the power to determine what ideas can and cannot be acceptable, and that's not something we can allow.
And here's something interesting about this. where did Biden win on Super Tuesday? Which states did he win? Which most of the states that he won is in the South.
South, yes.
These states don't vote Democratic.
They don't. They're not going to flip.
So he's basically winning states that
He's not
Republican.
gonna win.
So to the centrist argument, because these southern states have so much influence on the election, they're picking candidates that are Republican, but Democrats just make bad Republicans, right?
Yes.
They're not good Republicans. They're just making. So they're picking Republican candidates, but Democrats are not good Republican candidates.
Yeah. There's a saying in economics, like, let's say you have someone who likes chunky peanut butter and someone who likes smooth peanut butter. If you try and make peanut butter that's kind of chunky but not totally smooth, you end up displeasing both. You have to appeal to one market or the other.
So this is what's happening. I think the fact that
facts, actually.
the fact that they're picking all these these candidates who are winning in the South, like with Hillary Clinton and now with Joe Biden, I think you're just sending up candidates to lose, and they need to come up with some sort of system to account for that. Whether it give the northern states, the states that vote Democratic, more delegates, whatever they need to do, they need to fix that, because these southern states are like basically driving Republican candidates to compete against other Republicans.
I actually never thought of it like that, and
They're
actually
getting
makes so much sense.
They're getting destroyed because of it. They're picking all these centrist candidates who are just bad Republicans.
Yeah, you're not going to appeal to Democrats by being a bad Republican. You have to be a Democrat.
Exactly.
But then also the popular vote doesn't matter anymore anyway. Well, like how much? Like I said earlier, like how much is it gonna matter anyway?
The popular vote doesn't matter.
It does. Yeah, if you get a majority of votes in a state, you get the electoral votes for that state.
Not
but
necessarily.
Yes, necessarily. If you get a majority of votes in a state, then you
For the
win that
general
state.
election, yeah.
But if you of course, if you get a majority of votes in the country, that doesn't necessarily mean you win the election.
No, but isn't it that the elector can decide to veto?
There are faithless electors, but it's like a handful. It's
very,
so
very,
few that it doesn't even matter much at all. And yeah, like it's generally speaking, your vote, not generally speaking, your vote matters. Yeah. And even with the widespread voter suppression that goes on, you should be doing your best to vote, because it does matter. Florida in 2000 came down to a few people, and had Jeb Bush not been the governor at the time, maybe things would be different.
Yeah. And had Al Gore won his own state.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah.
And what do you think? So when Jersey comes around, right? We're in June, so it's gonna be what?
We're like towards
June 2nd. We're almost last.
Where do you think we're gonna pro Bernie?
I mean, as I talked to a few pollsters. I know Brother Zeyad doesn't like polls, but I'm okay with them.
No, I'm okay with polls.
You don't like the horse race element?
Yeah, I don't like the horse race element. Like
Yeah.
this week, this.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to a few pollsters, and a few weeks ago, the top two candidates were Bernie Sanders and Michael Bloomberg. So
In Jersey?
So that's a very interesting dichotomy.
That's so bad.
Yeah, not very.
Shitty, were you involved in these polls?
Yeah, and the race has shifted massively since then. You have all the centrists consolidating under a single candidate now. It's basically Biden, Sanders, and Gabbard, who's for some reason still in the race. But yeah,
Amy Klobuchar shouldn't have been there from the beginning with. I don't know.
This idea of consolidating, though, this makes little sense. If you really think about it, you're like, we're going to just get behind the guy who's already winning. Well, in the general election, you're going to vote for that person anyway. So why do you even need to get behind this person? You see?
Vote your conscience in the primary, and then vote.
If it really
whatever.
didn't matter, if you're going to vote blue anyways, why throw the election one way or the other?
Yeah,
if you say I'm going to vote blue anyways, pick your conscience. It makes no sense to me. This whole consolidating argument.
Yeah.
And shit, if Biden does win, you still gonna vote for him? I know, and it's like,
I mean,
he said no.
Okay, I mean, I do prefer Biden over Trump, but I'd be seriously dry heaving if I had to check his name by the ballot. I'm gonna have to do some thinking, because I don't want to, I guess, reward these actions that led to Sanders not getting the nomination.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I want to vote, and he is better than.
Just vote an independent candidate. Who cares?
Maybe I'll just write in Sanders' name and just have that be my ballot for the presidential, and then vote down the ballot.
Well, we're in New Jersey. We're gonna vote blue anyway.
Yeah, so that's
that's another thing. I mean, there's no blood on my hands if I don't vote for Biden. If I lived in a swing state, I'd vote for Biden probably, even though I'd be dry heaving as I did it. But in a state like New Jersey, I'll probably, if there's an independent candidate that I prefer over either of them, I'll vote for that independent candidate.
I think that's the same thing for me.
Even though you don't vote.
I did vote. In 2008. I voted for Ralph Nader.
Ralph Nader. I wish I could have
I'm
voted for
proud
Ralph
to-
Nader.
Ralph Nader was the original Bernie Sanders.
Can you please?
I love Ralph Nader.
Can you please
Yes.
tell
Ralph
us
Nader is
about
one of
you?
my-
So you told me about Ralph Nader. Can you please tell the audience
Yes.
about Ralph Nader?
Ralph Nader, EPA, Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, Freedom of Information Act. Just keep listing them. The Nader traders were involved in all of these. The foundation of all of these. There's like 100 and something agencies that has benefited human life that they were involved in. One guy.
Ralph Nader's a personal hero of mine.
He's
Like,
one of my true personal heroes.
Is he the old white guy in Congress right now?
And here's the thing.
he's not in Congress right now.
No, he was never elected.
No.
Some people say he was the most influential person not elected
Ever.
in American
Ever.
history, in American politics. Just never elected, never ran for office. Just a guy who seatbelts. His mate,
Yes.
obviously seatbelts. He's the person. So how he started out. So GM, they knew about all these accidents. They knew about all these accidents in their cars and how unsafe they were, and they didn't do anything about it. And he wrote his book Unsafe at Any Speed, where he showed that they had knowledge of all of these things, but they didn't do anything about it. And through, GM actually made it worse for themselves because he was supposed to testify before Congress, and GM hired prostitutes to go try
Yes,
to get
they
him,
try
try
and
to
get him-
blackmail him to impugn his character so he could destroy him and what actually happened is he just was suspicious. I think someone's tapping my phone and this at the other, and it blew up. They actually found evidence that GM did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Congress called in a meeting, and through this, the American public sided with him immensely. That he eventually got laws to make seatbelts pass and airbags pass and the whole 9 yards. If you think about seatbelts, Ralph Nader.
Yeah, Ralph Nader is one of my inspirations for why I wanted to become a lawyer in the first place.
Yeah.
I mean, if I could even have a fraction
of
of what he accomplished, I would be ecstatic. I'd be so happy with what I'd done for my country and my community. I mean,
That's what bothers me about politics in general. I just don't like that it's always the stupid people that get elected, man. It's such the truth. It just bothers me. It makes me give up. And I said it once at work, and I was like, we were talking. My coworkers don't have a problem talking about politics, and I was like, I'm not voting. I was like, yeah, and then some lady goes up to me, no, you better vote. This is why we have an idiot in office.
I don't think it's necessary. I think to get to that level, to get to those endorsements, and to get to the money, the financing, etc., I think you have to sell your soul. You have to, unfortunately, to that level, to the national level.
yeah.
To the national level, you have to give up certain things. Barack Obama there's a video of Barack Obama before he was senator. He was talking about the benefits of single payer. I'm not sure if you saw that video.
Yes, I'm aware.
He's praising single payer healthcare system. When he had his healthcare summit, when Obamacare was passed, they invited every single position on the books except for the single payer, even though that was the most popular position amongst the American public. It's just you just have to sell your soul. You have to give up certain things.
Money is just where the money's at.
A very, very similar situation with Pete Buttigieg. In early 2018, he was in support of these very left-wing policies, from the Green New Deal to Medicare for All. But starting with his election run in 2019, of course, he realized very quickly that he wasn't going to win as a progressive candidate, so he positioned himself as kind of the moderate alternative to Joe Biden for voters who were skeptical about his age and his cognitive ability. And, in doing so, he adopted his Medicare for All Who Want It plan, where, let's have Medicare, but for all, but half as good, basically.
He was the chunky but smooth peanut butter.
Yes.
Nobody wanted it.
Yeah, I mean, it's and he has more support from billionaires in the financial sector than any other candidate. I mean, there was an analysis done for each candidate and how often they used certain words: middle class, working class, poverty, millionaires, and billionaires. The candidate obviously used these terms the most was Sanders, especially the term poverty and the poor. Elizabeth Warren used the phrase middle class very frequently, and Buttigieg used all of these phrases the least. He made very few references to class as a concept, which would make sense. It would make sense why, given the fact that he doesn't want to challenge these existing class hierarchy, given his support from the financial sector.
That's interesting.
I didn't know that. And
Yeah.
Where do you guys get this stuff? Let's just side tangent.
Read.
You're not gonna like the
4
answer,
letters.
but it's 4 letters. It's read. I mean, I have
My God.
I have subscriptions to 4 newspapers. I read the Foreign Policy magazine every morning. I spend my free time reading political theory. I'm a political science major, so obviously this stuff I kind of have to do for my major. But even if I wasn't, I still take this very seriously, and I trying to dive headfirst through it. And then, of course, surround yourself with people who are as knowledgeable, or ideally more knowledgeable than you are about this. I'm privileged enough to have classes where people who are far, far more intelligent, far more well-read than I am, who also hold positions that are totally different from mine,
Contrary, yeah.
can have conversation with this. One of my best friends on my college campus is a socialist. I'm not a socialist. He's an actual socialist. He thinks Marx was correct. He has a book called Karl Marx Was Right, and he hangs it up on a shelf just for people to get people the right idea. But I don't agree with him. I'm more towards the left on economics, but I'm not a socialist. But he's also incredibly well-read, unbelievably well-read. He's so intelligent.
As most true socialists are.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me how most anti-capitalists tend to be very, very well-read. They can rebut Ayn Rand's objectivism in a dozen different ways from a dozen different perspectives, and it's incredible to me. And I might not agree with them, but I hope to get to that level of knowledge someday. Yeah.
My downfall, and I'm saying this on this, is going to be my reading. It's going to be my downfall.
It has to be. It has to be like the first thing.
Yes.
Is someone's phone ringing?
Oh, yeah, that was mine. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I kept looking. I was like, "It's mine? And then, no, we're not. I don't know. Never mind. Do you think
vary your news sources too, right?
Yes.
That's the other thing. If you're going to like that mainstream, BBC, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, you're going to get the very, very skewed perspective. Like the idea of reading, you're going to actually get the ideas. You're going to get the reason why I hate the horse race is because it's always about this. What does this Democrat think about this issue? Something happened in the world. What is the coronavirus? What is this? What did the Republicans think? What did Democrats think? Who cares? Who cares? Give me what a scientific expert thinks.
Yes.
I don't care about what the Democratic chief strategist thinks about the coronavirus. Does that make sense? And if you're just getting your news information from these sources, that's all you're going to get. You're going to get the horse race. That's what I mean by the horse race. I hate the horse race. You're not going to get that varied perspective,
But bias is everywhere, and you're gonna get some type of bias in anything.
No, but you're gonna get information. You're gonna get when is the last time you saw to discuss an issue about politics? You saw a college professor come on.
Never, ever.
You saw a college professor or a major thinker. No, I'm talking somebody like this discussing
who moderates the debates. Who moderates the debates?
Right, you have
random pundits.
Random pundits who know nothing.
This idea of pundits who apparently know everything, talking about everything. Does that make sense? It's a very, very watered down source of information.
So, obviously you're not going to be able to find the source without bias. The closest would probably be Associated Press, which is incredibly dry, bare bones reporting.
That's what happened.
Yeah, it's just what happened. But, you should try and have a variety of biases. So you have, Wall Street Journal, fiscally conservative, New York Times, kind of a liberal, Washington Post, kind of neoliberal, centrist, and then sources that are less orthodox, like Democracy Now! Which is with Amy Goodman, which is biased towards left-wing anti-authoritarianism, but it's biased in a way that you very infrequently see.
It counterbalances the others. It counterbalances Democracy Now!, the Real News Network.
Democracy Now! Is the better of the two, in my opinion. But yeah,
Democracy Now! Is very, very short. It's very straight to the point.
Yeah.
You have networks like these
but for me, it's like a lot of these, like my issues whenever I read stuff like this, and what turns me off a lot of it, like some of them you look at, you could tell something's like they're in it just to grab the people, right? Or to grab, like, how do I explain it? Like,
I don't know if have you seen Democracy Now?
No. But it's a lot. Not like, how do I explain this? It's like some of them you could tell like are trying to make people give up something, to get something else. Like, how do I? Like, we get a lot in a lot of these like feminist or liberal movements, right? In general, you get a lot of stigmas like, oh, this just all be nice and dandy, and I feel like that's what a lot of these outlets are doing in general. Some opinions I might agree about, yeah. They'll give you some really nice options about some stuff that's really good, but you watch their content in totality and you realize that, like, not really.
I think that's the kind of news we have right now. You have infotainment, right? You don't really have news in the true sense of what we think is news, right? Understanding what the world around you, and everything's decontextualized. There's no idea like why did this happen. Everything's like an independent event that just happened out of nowhere. I think when you have like infotainment as news, I think you'll get a lot of that, right? This issue happens here. How does this let's see, the modern issue. How does this war? It's something in Syria. It's how is that related to another issue? Let's say something that's going on in South America. Like there's generally governmental policies that's overarching.
Yeah.
That influences both, right? But there's everything's decontextualized. There's no
Everything's
like,
made black and white when it's not.
It's very, very separated.
Things don't happen in a vacuum. You know, everything exists in its grand context. You know, the fact that, for example, you know, I think a lot of times you can gauge why a certain piece of media is receiving attention or not receiving attention based on who would it serve to report this and why would it serve them. You know, there's a reason why the protests against neoliberalism in Chile receive very little coverage. I saw The Economist post an article about it. The Economist is extremely good at reporting issues from all over the world, even though they're biased towards like neoliberal centrism. But aside from that, I saw very little. Whereas the protests in Hong Kong got massive amounts of coverage. Now, I support both of these protests, but at the same time, you know, why was one receiving coverage and the other not? Because Hong Kong is a hub for finance and global investors throughout the world, and it's being menaced by this totalitarian, authoritarian, illiberal state that poses a threat to the liberal Western order that, you know, many people seek to uphold. Whereas Chile is the protester against neoliberalism, which is the central ideology of the West.
Yeah, it's basically who's benefiting, right? And then you could even look at this, not to sound conspiratorial or anything, but you have like even the human rights agencies, like Human Rights Watch, for example. Why do they focus on certain issues that always seem to be in America's interest or in like an imperialistic interest, like Darfur or something like this, where they don't focus on other issues like, let's say, the Congo, where you might actually start going against transnational corporations like Apple or something, right? It's that focus, and everything is decontextualized and separated out.
Money means a lot. And do you think any of these things are going to change over there? Like how much do you think things are? What if anything, and how much are things going to be changing over the next like 10 to 20 years?
Well, part of the so-called information age, right? With the internet was supposed to democratize information, and you're supposed to have all the access to
Everything.
A plethora of like, you know, information sources. I don't think you've really seen that. I don't think that has panned out. Certainly to younger people, I think that's also driving the Bernie movement, right? You have you have that ability now to, and the WikiLeaks, and you have that ability now to start getting information from non-traditional sources. Mm-hmm. You know, they like to say the fake news. Part of this fake news claim is to try to like delegitimize alternative sources of information. It's like, please just listen to the status quo. Don't worry about anything else.
There's a song in High School Musical that says that's literally the name of the song. The follow the status quo. It's literally the name of the song.
Stick to the status quo.
Stick to the status quo. High School Musical.
Yes.
I was watching the movie the other day. That's why I'm mentioning it.
No, I don't know anything about that. But
Brother's like, what are these kids talking about?
High School Musical.
It was a good movie.
It was okay.
It was good. The series? Talking about series.
I haven't watched the television series.
It's not.
The movie series.
Yes.
It's okay. Yeah.
High School Musical, the musical series.
Yeah, it's okay. It's nothing.
You are being recorded.
Yes, I'm.
This
being
will
recorded.
be.
I'm fine. It's nothing special. I mean, I have nostalgia.
This will remain on the internet forever.
No, I mean, I was in New Mexico, and when Albuquerque, everyone's like, yeah, let's go see the setting of High School Musical, where it was recorded, and I'm like, okay, sure. You know,
It's in
Albuquerque. Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Really, that's so lost right now.
I have no clue, man, what you guys are talking about.
It's a really good. It wasn't great. I don't think production quality. I think it stemmed with like very quality with ethics. I don't
It's
like.
Disney, right?
Yes, it's Disney. Okay.
It's stemmed with very, very, very progressive views.
I have my hatred for Disney. It's okay.
Okay, now that we've finished talking about mediocre musicals from our childhood, let's get back to the media status quo.
So you were saying about the status quo.
The second thing is, I think people just don't realize it. Most people, someone was making an interesting claim People in North Korea or China, they realize that what the government is saying is propaganda. They know it, right? If I told you what you're hearing on the news is propaganda, you'd probably look at me like, we have a free press. We have a free press. This is not...
It's a normal question, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So part of it is also recognizing that your information sources are completely corporate-centric, right? It's heavily biased, right? You don't expect MSNBC, the most liberal network, to start talking about war, right? When they have billion-dollar weapons contracts. You don't expect CNN to ask certain questions in debate, right? When Lockheed Martin, when there's an ad comes out for Lockheed Martin, this debate was sponsored by Lockheed Martin, a plane manufacturer that for warplanes, right? This debate was sponsored by Lockheed Martin. What questions will come up in that debate? If the person paying the light bill and paying the salaries of the people asking the questions, right, is a sponsor for your debate, and it's in their interest not to have these questions. I think Bernie made a joke about it, right? He said, you're going to see some ads running for some health insurance companies or something like this coming up right after this.
They're going to criticize me, telling me don't vote for Bernie Sanders.
Exactly.
He said that's exactly what he said.
Yeah. You have the same people paying the bills, or the ones who are, controlling the narrative. And even though we have a free press, to get to the positions, so for example, Anderson Cooper would say, no one tells me what to do. No one tells me what to do. I am free to say whatever I want to say. And I would respond with, you wouldn't have got into that position had you not shown that you could play ball. Had you not shown that you were already playing
what they wanted. You're already what they wanted.
Exactly. You don't get to those positions, right? And we have a free press in terms of there's few government restrictions, right?
Yeah.
But it's such corporate centric that I think the 6 companies control 80% of everything you see and read.
One of them is Disney. One of them is Disney.
Right, News Corp. Yes. Disney's one of them. Yeah.
Yes.
Disney's one of the 6. Right. News Corp controls, for example, HarperCollins, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Post, Fox News. Just keep going down the list. 2,200 radio stations across the U.S. You're just going to be stunned. They even control the textbook publishers that you read.
The textbooks?
Yeah, the textbooks, the magazines, the newspapers, the radio. The movie 20th Century Fox, everything, just everything. You're just, unless you get away from that model, you're gonna.
But then so I had a essay to write for Miss. Shout out to Miss. Still gonna give you a shout out. I'm wearing the shirt. Woo.
Smooth plug.
A smooth plug. It's an intentional plug. I'm
just mispaying you. We're just talking about media bias right now.
Have you seen Chomsky's 5 filters of
propaganda
bias?
model?
Yeah. Advertising's one of them.
Let me just check my
by the way,
account. It didn't pay me yet.
Give him the book.
Yeah, I'll give you the book. I have.
Yeah.
You better give me the book.
Yes, I'll give you manufacturing consent. I'll give you people's history.
If you knew how many books I have in my house that I don't read, if you knew how many, oh my
God. just passed on. I passed it on to Sharif. Sharif is going to pass it on to you.
Yes.
Inshallah.
And then I'm going to give you the fateful triangle too, because that's a very important.
Very, very, very important. Yeah.
Inshallah.
You can't be Palestinian and not
yes,
read.
I can't. It frustrates me that I know more about this than some Palestinians. Like, so everyone's like, yeah, woo, Palestine. And I'm like, okay, what about XXX?
Dude, they didn't know where the Aqsa was, my guy. Remember, your class didn't know what the Aqsa was.
Yeah, I had a girl who's Syrian tell me, it's like, yeah, I still don't understand the Syrian war, by the way, or anything about it. I'm like, are you serious?
No, that was always the claim. Like, Palestinians come, like, they wear the what is it called, the hatta?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then Palestine, and you're like, when's the Balfour Declaration? What's the Balfour Declaration? What's the Balfour Declaration? And they're looking at you like, I don't know.
It's something.
Yeah,
it's important.
It's like a betrayal of your entire history.
It's very important.
No, the Fairfield Triangle. Noam Chomsky, pass it on.
Yeah, I would get I'd read a book about the history of Israel-Palestine first, because, like, the Fatal Triangle itself is an argument.
Phyllis Benner, she has a primer. Phyllis Benner.
Yeah.
It's amazing, though. You know what I find interesting? Jewish/non-practicing Jews have written the best books about it.
Yes, you don't see as many Arab Muslim people who are writing in defense of Palestine and criticizing Israel. It's very irreligious Jews who are doing it, from Norman Finkelstein to Noam Chomsky.
Michael Newman, Phyllis Bennis. Just go down the list. You'll just be amazed.
Interesting.
Right.
Again, they've been telling me. You guys understand? They've been telling me.
We're trying to get him to read, guys.
They've been telling me to read this stuff for ages.
Anyone who's watching this, I want you to just shove a book in Ahmed Saqer's face and make him take it with
I actually am so down. If you guys are watching
only
this
present to
and
get
can
him.
show me that you've been watching this by taking a book and shoving it in my face, I am down.
Ahmed's parents, or if you're watching this, only get him books for his
Only
next
books.
10 birthdays.
Yes.
Only books.
Only books.
My parents do watch this. What the heck, man?
Yes, watch it. Okay, so then get
His
him books for his
graduation
next
gift.
birthdays.
Books.
All teachers,
I have a
assign
feeling-
him more books.
I actually have a feeling some of the teachers are giving me that. 100%. I actually genuinely think so.
Please, Sister Dunya, Sister Heba, do it. Brother Zeyad, you're here, so you're gonna do it. I know you are.
He's gonna do it.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you manufacturing consent when you graduate.
I'm gonna have a lot of. Dude,
It's a great
Well,
read.
I have a shelf this long, right? Filled with 2 shelves filled with books. I don't read them. It's sad. But going back to the conversation, right? About this news stuff and money. I had to write an essay for Miss and the question was, should news outlets go non-profit, right?
Should they go non-profit?
Then answer my question.
Is that even possible?
Yeah,
I don't think it's possible.
It's
If
very
you're a
expensive.
if you're a lucrative multi-billion-dollar company, would you?
I mean, yeah. Look at democracy now. I mean, they're very small. They can afford to have it be non-advertisement based, non-profit based,
Yeah.
but they're very small. If you want a big cable news organization, it's not really possible for it to be non-profit, unfortunately.
So one of the interesting things is the FCC, which controls the communication airwaves, right? In the 70s, 80s, right?
Yeah.
There were like 50 companies.
Yes.
Now there's 6, right? They've consolidated. Just like how you have antitrust laws and monopoly
tech,
laws,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
You need to break them up, right? Because they actually use the public airwaves for free. Most people don't know this.
Yeah.
CNN, they all just start listing the companies. They use the public airwaves for free. The billion-dollar infrastructure that taxpayers put up.
So we pay for the news.
We've put all of these up. Rush Limbaugh and all of these guys complaining about government subsidies. They use the public airwaves for free to make millions of dollars. Right? So the FCC has some control over this. Right? What they can do is try to start breaking them up. But then anyone who tries to even approach that, is going to say like, oh, this person's a dictator, and they're trying to stifle media.
Yeah.
The media is going to launch an all-out assault on this
all
person.
100%.
No one's going to even challenge this.
Give me a second. I just have to respond to this. The face. This is the face that we. This is the face of disappointment in what we have right now, and
I mean, this is my issue with the phrase fake news, actually, because typically when the phrase fake news is used, it's used against whatever Trump finds to be critical of him. I mean, he even used it against Fox News after I think he pulled out of northern Syria, and even the Fox and Friends hosts were saying that was a horrible decision.
even
And so
when Fox News says you're wrong,
yeah, and then
you're wrong.
he's like, watch One America News Network. They are real news, and then it's even worse than Fox. But in general, I think people need to approach this media criticism from a different angle. People say like, oh, bias towards liberal, bias towards conservative. Who cares? Look at the institutions that back medias. Obviously, it's good to understand what direction a media outlet leans in so that you can curate a proper media diet. But at the same time, look at the institutions that back it, and you can gain a really strong picture as to why they focus on the issues that they do. MSNBC, the reason why you'll never hear them talking much at all about unions, about strikes, about climate strikes, about Israel-Palestine, while they always focus on Russiagate, is firstly because it's sexy, it makes for very appealing television, but secondly because the point of the fundamental idea that surrounds left-wing politics is that it's subversive, it challenges power, it challenges existing hierarchies. MSNBC is supported and funded by the status quo, and so it's incentivized to defend the status quo, and so they're left with very few left-wing ideas that they can actually talk about because they tend to be subversive. So they'll focus on Russiagate, not only because it's makes for very appealing television because it's so juicy, the gossip, the conspiracies and everything, but also because but also because it doesn't really threaten the interests of any of their power backers.
And you could always see it when there's a build-up to war. I mean, you guys are a little young for the Iraq War build-up, right? This is happening.
Yeah, we're nowhere.
Nowhere close. But you could see there's no media network who's critical of it. No, none. Even the ones that are supposed, like MSNBC, that would supposedly challenge the status quo. No, they're all in cheerful support of it. And then they come in and say, and then there was information coming out like, no, this is all fake, and this is what they're actually saying is completely wrong. And then you'll hear arguments, oh, like Hillary, we wish we knew then what we know now. I was like, well, I was in eighth grade, and I knew then what I know now. You're a senator.
I knew it back then. I don't know about you.
Like I'm sure you had more resources than me to get information. So it's one of those things, and
I mean, a lot of people don't even remember why we went to Afghanistan in the first place. We went there because Al-Qaeda was being housed by the Taliban. And it was by 2002 that we had pretty much dismantled the Taliban. And yet we're still there in 2020. Taliban is stronger now than they ever were. 2002 would have been the perfect time to have this peace treaty that we're currently having.
Oh yeah, the best argument, the best nonsensical argument, like it's like an infinite loop. When John McCain responded, he's like, "We're gonna stay there until we defeat the insurgents." Right? This is the best use of a euphemism ever. Because what is an insurgent? An insurgent is a person who's resisting your occupation. Yes. So we're gonna continue occupying them until they stop resisting our occupation.
So you might as well just level the entire place to the ground.
So basically, we're not leaving.
We're stuck here.
Yeah,
I mean, guys.
So much of how we view foreign policy is surrounded by this seemingly adenine political phrases and rhetoric, and it's really sinister and disgusting. It's like when Hillary Clinton was asked in 2016, surprisingly about whether or not she would use force on Russia, and she's like, "Oh no, we'll just have a no-fly zone." But a no-fly zone means that you level the opposing country's aircraft to a point where they can no longer threaten your airspace. What if they're flying in the zone?
What if they do fly in your zone?
Well, what are you going to do about them? Just let them? Then it's not a no-fly zone anymore. If you want to maintain the no-fly zone, you got to bomb the heck out of all these planes.
But the interesting part of media is like they don't follow up with the questions, right? They don't follow up on it's like, but what if? Because they want, well, what if they do fly into your zone? Because you want to seem, I want to seem neutral now. This is like apparent so-called objectivity. I don't want to question them too hard because it's going to seem like I'm taking one side over the other. Yeah. So you just leave it there.
Nate Silver's the king of this. Yes. Like, I remember, what's her name? Kellyanne Conway was on his show, and he got this massive praise, like, oh, you're so neutral. Well, neutral in this case just means that you're a fence sitter. You're not really criticizing. There are some things that deserve to be criticized. It's not that the truth doesn't always lie in the middle. There are instances where you have to go after this, incorrect statement, where you have to go after this dishonesty. There are some, and that often means you have to abandon your pretense of, being moderate, however you wish to define that, and being neutral.
And so whoever calls it out gets screwed as well.
This is like, I think, I don't know if you studied any journalism, right? But one of the things is, you be moderate, be objective, give both sides the right. Well, let's see how this is also wrong. When you have Israel versus Palestine, right? Clearly one side is
much worse,
the aggressor, and one side is but they'll say, well, Israel says this, Palestine says this, but there's no like, well, one of them was actually right and one of them was actually wrong. Right? It's just like, she said this, he said this, and we're going to leave it there. You decide what you want to decide.
They don't take opinions.
It's a very good way to prop up opinions that are clearly illegitimate. Yeah. But at the same time,
give it the level of like, they're both equal in level. They're both
exactly. It's like forcing a level playing field. Well, this one's down here, and this one's down here. But to be nice, we're just going to make them equal.
We're just going to say they're both, they both said this, and we're not going to take sides. Not taking sides is actually propping up one of them. All right.
Yeah.
There's no investigative reporting, where there's no investigative journalism, where you just you're going after the truth. It's more like we're just going after this balance, where it's not we're going after the truth. Does that make sense?
I mean, we haven't had a conversation about this before, but that literally makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Because it's literally the same equality argument or equity argument. It's like literally making something equal that's not supposed to be there.
Yeah.
Okay. And going back to the war thing, because and I want to segue into this. I don't use the word segue. I use segue.
Swagway.
Shitty
because he has a lot of swag.
I'm swag. No, one of my coworkers uses the word shway, so we're gonna swagway this week.
If you're watching this, please stop doing that. You're causing me mild discomfort by having Ahmed say this.
So this war concept, right? We know that we haven't been in the state of... I don't think the world has ever been in peace except for the past 203 years. In the entire history of the world, the world's only been at peace for 203 years total. I think. I don't know if you've ever heard that.
I mean, that we'd have to guess at numbers, but realistically, there's probably always been some form of conflict.
Yeah,
Sometimes they're more peaceful than others.
When was it?
No. So in fact, we've only been at peace for 203 years.
When?
Not one time. In total.
Okay.
Oh.
In total.
I mean, maybe. Who knows?
So is here's my question, right? To solve these problems, and you guys know whether this is also discussed in the political debates. Is to solve this? Is it more just pull out and everything costs end the wars in totality, or is?
I mean, there's a right and wrong way to approach things. I mean, I have a very you break it, you buy it approach to intervention. I think that the U.S. has a responsibility to invest in the countries that it's destabilized so heavily. And then, at the same time, of course, there are situations where pulling out will destabilize. There are very limited situations. I mean, this is invoked all the time, of course, to say, oh, we shouldn't pull out of this region. It'll destabilize this region even more. Usually that's just an excuse to warmonger and engage in conflict even more. But there are very limited instances where that's correct. I think northern Syria, the decision to pull out, which, by the way, didn't even decrease the troop presence because all those troops were placed in Iraq right afterwards. But setting that aside, it allowed the Turkish-backed militias to advance, rampage against the Kurds, forced them to ally with Bashar al-Assad, and subsequently throw away any chance at an autonomous Kurdish state. That was a case where U.S. presence actually would have been great. And guess what? The one time it would have been great, we don't get it.
Yeah, so not only did they have, they have actually a legal responsibility.
Yes, international law.
Yeah, international law. The Nuremberg tribunals actually said that if you go and you aggressively attack someone, you don't have any rights. Yeah. This is actually this is actually very important for the Israeli-Palestinian situation. But I'll get to that.
Get into go ahead.
Okay, so they actually have a legal right. So if you go into a country aggressively, you not only are you're responsible for fixing everything. You have a legal obligation to do so. Right, and this idea that if we pull out, it's going to destabilize. Perhaps, but there's ways of getting around that. That's like saying I'm going to go in there and mess up your country, and then because I messed up your country, I have to be there now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. You've just got into another infinite loop. Especially with war, we love these infinite loops. Right. No, what you could do is because I got in, I'm going to have to take on the responsibility of paying for all of this stuff and bring in an international force. Right, whereas there's some sort of piece of where there's a plan to scale it back. Right, you have to have some sort of something where perhaps just leaving right away is going to be destabilizing. Right, for example, like Syria, but then you have to bring in force and you have to take on the burden of that.
Yeah,
does it make sense? Where you can scale it back, like the UN. This is the whole purpose of the UN, right?
Yes,
the UN task force. The UN is supposed to,
Yeah, America doesn't listen to the UN. We know that.
So, and the financial cost of that should be on you.
Yep.
Because you're the one who
you broke it, you buy it,
right?
You buy
it's actually what the Nuremberg tribunal is actually that came out of there.
I mean,
right?
Yeah, aggressive war is
Geneva Conventions. Yeah,
it's called the linchpin of all war crimes because every single war crime stems from aggressive intervention. Aggressive war needs to happen for other war crimes to happen in the first place. Exactly. And so you violate that legal right, you've opened the door to all of these other war crimes stemming from, deliberately targeting civilians, to recklessly targeting civilians, to damaging infrastructure, in the Persian Gulf War, where they were deliberately targeting sewers to a point where it amounted to biological warfare, which, again...
And then after they bombed the sewer system, they stopped the import of ammonia.
Yeah.
Right? So 500,000 kids died from diarrhea and dysentery. So, but with the Israeli situation is why this is important, because a lot of times you say Israel deserves this and the Palestinians, I know this is going to be super controversial right now, Israel deserves this, Palestinians deserve this. Actually, what Israel doesn't have rights in the situation in the sense that they have responsibilities. Once you fulfill these responsibilities, you will get the security, right? Because these are your responsibilities. To come in there and say, it's like someone walked into your house, did some crime, let's say shot somebody or something, and then say, oh, you have my back is turned right now, you can't shoot. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Imagine you can't shoot me, I'm not looking. It's not a fair fight.
It's like you have, I know this is super, you have responsibilities under the international law. You actually have responsibilities first and foremost. That's fulfill your responsibilities, and then the security will come through that. Does it make
Yeah.
sense? They never talk about, no one ever talks about, Israel's not fulfilling
Rights
its
in general,
responsibility.
right? Nobody looks at rights as a responsibility. It has as a effect of responsibility. And I agree 100%. Rights, in order to attain rights, you have to do something for it. And in some sense, I just worded that so badly. Let me word it correctly.
You don't have the right to water.
Yeah, I have to earn my water first.
No,
no,
for you.
No, this is not what I
You gotta
mean.
earn your salt. He's putting you
There's a balance between rights and responsibilities. You can't expect to receive rights without being responsible or accountable for something. I have no problem with that sentence.
No, and yeah, international law says 1, 2, 3. And I think it would be helpful if we can actually enforce international law, right? That's another thing.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that, I think quite convincingly, that pretty much every president from Eisenhower to Trump has violated international law in some capacity, more than once. I mean, so the fact that we can actually say that means that the international laws we have are not being enforced in any meaningful capacity. And something needs to be done about that.
They're talking about impeaching Trump, and you're like, well, you can impeach every single president for just violating international law, starting an illegal war. That's an impeachable offense. But it doesn't happen.
Targeting civilians or killing thousands of civilians due to drone strikes to a point where it's either intentional or negligent by that point, and doing that over several years, and then proceeding to expand the program by 400%, and then the next president also proceeding to expand the program by 400%. Stuff like that. No one. It's really, I think, a big reason. I'm not saying that Trump didn't deserve to get impeached over the Ukraine scandal. I think he absolutely did. But the only reason that got the level of attention that it did was because Trump was challenging another member of the power structures that governed the people who wanted to, the power structures that governed the party that people the people who wanted to impeach him came from. If it was someone other than Joe Biden.
Okay, so this is a good. This is actually. I'm glad he mentions this point. You've ever heard of Cointelpro?
Cointelpro?
Yeah.
No, inform me.
Okay, so Cointelpro was a government conducted by the FBI. Immensely, their mission was to stifle resistance movements within the United States. For example, they were wiretapping Martin Luther King,
Yes.
Malcolm X.
BPP.
They were possibly involved in assassinations against the Black Panthers. Right, there was a lot of things in there that the Cointelpro was. You'd just be amazed at the stuff they did, right? And this is Freedom of Information Act, request that eventually went through. That shows that the level of interference these guys had in these movements, right? From the civil rights to particularly the Black Panthers, they wanted to shut them down. No one's ever heard of COINTELPRO. The resources that went into it was vast, right? In the famous movie with Malcolm X, you had the two guys wiretapping Malcolm. I don't know if you guys seen the movie.
What's the movie?
The one with Denzel.
I think I watched it, but
Right,
way back
right?
when, yeah.
And the two guys are, they're making a comment about, something about Malcolm X and his wife, and he's like, oh, it's better than the other guy, right? Or some reference to Martin Luther King. But the idea that those guys were working with COINTELPRO. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
And then it just went under the radar. Whereas Watergate became this national, scandal where Nixon was kicked out because of this, right? He was forced to resign. Just because it affected his scandal, affected the power elite.
Yes.
Whereas COINTELPRO was affecting the everyday guy, the activists, the people no one cared, Martin Luther King's, the Malcolm X's, right? Whereas Watergate was against the Democratic Party.
Yeah, and similar situation for Trump.
situation,
He could technically have been impeached from the moment he stepped into office, given his emoluments clause violations and given his expansion of the drone strike programs. But it wasn't until he challenged a member of the establishment that people decided, okay, now we need to impeach him. Had it been someone else, it wouldn't have mattered much at all. Presumably, you can say with some certainty.
And I also think the fact that Obama didn't do anything against Bush. I think the fact that he didn't seek, he just said, we're not going to look for any trials or anything like this. XYZ war crimes were committed. It's been shown that they deliberately misled the country to war, killed 1.5 million Iraqis.
Read the Afghanistan papers.
Right? Yeah. Amazing. It's been shown, and the fact that he did not decide to pursue it, I think it gives, that opens up the power of the presidency to be abusive. So part of the reason Trump was allowed to expand executive power so much
Yeah.
and get away with so much is because his predecessor didn't go after the previous one who
Did these things?
who did these things, right? I think that's what's important, that you hold people accountable, because if you don't, you just like you enter the slippery slope where anything goes and you can't really do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense as well. And there was something else I want to talk about. No, I think we're good. I think
Pretty long.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
We hit an hour and a half. Sharif, yeah, everybody that walks out of this, and I'm gonna say this on stream because on podcast, because someone else wanted to mention it, but then his recording is being redone. Everybody who comes here enjoys it. So like I don't know why. I guess it's like everybody comes out of podcast like, wow, it's pretty fun, man. It's like, yeah, that's why I enjoy it.
It was a very productive discussion. We got a lot out of there. We had good, media.
Yeah.
Current political situation in Afghanistan.
I will say on the record, I take back my comment about you get rights without responsibilities. I take back that comment.
Just defining the term, you got to earn your salt.
Yeah. I'm sorry. As well, thank you both for being here, and I hope you guys.
It was a pleasure.
It was
a pleasure.
We're gonna do the shout out thing. Zeyad knows this. I don't know if you watched the end of the last podcast. On my podcast, we have to do the shout out thing. So we're gonna shout out the missed, because I just feel like shouting them out. My Instagram at SaqerPunch, SaqerPunch. That's for my personal Instagram, personal public Instagram. My podcast page on Instagram, T Passion Project, TPASSIONPROJECT. Okay, and then our YouTube at The Passion Project, iTunes The Passion Project, SoundCloud The Passion Project, Twitch at SaqerPunch, whatever. And I think we're done here. Feel free to like, subscribe, and share.
Took 2 hours to set up. You please enjoy it.
Please, Sharif's had enough.